If the stars decide to rain down.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Ken Rampersaud show. Narine, if you could hear me, just raise your hand. Good, good, good. Look like we are in business. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so sorry about this. That we did have a little problem. We have a little problem here, but looks like we straighten things out. Um, so, Dr. Roindat, I want to say thank you very much for tuning in here tonight on Island Zone Radio. As you guys know that the truth of the matter is that so many children are running away from their homes and we don't know. But before we do that, I want to formally introduce to you Dr. Narine Dat, who hails from Kitchener in Canada. He's a doctor, a wealth of knowledge in this area here when it comes to domestic violence, suicide prevention, children and their problems. And so before we start this discussion, I want to talk about, there's an estimated between 1.6 million and 2.8 million youth runs away from home annually, right? And that is not a good thing. An estimate of 97,800 children were homeless at one time in their life. What is strange, though, a significant amount of runaway, typically 70 to 80%, they return home within a week of running away, while many return within 24 hours, about a quarter or so after 1 week. So, and there is about just 1% who never really return home. But what I want to say before we start this discussion is that, a lot of times that children run away from home, and sometimes they run away from home, and the thing is that some of them may be molested, they may be raped, they get into drugs, and so many other things in their life. So, Narine, good evening again, and welcome aboard. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Ken. How are you doing? Can you hear me there?
Um,
I hope you can hear me.
all right, go ahead and talk now. Let me see if I can
Yeah.
hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I could hear you now.
Awesome.
Go
Good
ahead.
stuff. Awesome.
All
Yeah.
right, go
So
ahead.
you were asking me how am I doing, and my
Yes, how are you
response to you
doing?
was I'm doing good. Thanks for asking.
Okay. And I want to say thank you very much for coming on such a late notice, Narine. Like, I was also pumped up to do the show, and then we had this problem. So now I have to get into the mindset of problem solving now, and let's start to discuss this problem. Like I said, so many children sometimes choose to choose to run away from home rather than staying home and deal with the problem. And we don't know what goes on. So let's talk. What are some of the common reasons that children run away from home?
All right, and that is a good question, Ken. And thank you for setting a good tone in terms of giving us some really good stats. So before I respond to that question, is that stat from the states or is it like in just
It's
like
a
New York City,
general in
general
the
type?
United
Okay,
States.
okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes. You're
That's really
welcome.
good information. So obviously, nobody run away from home, when they have a happy life. And I want to make it very clear that we are not pointing finger on anybody here. Like this, these are real things that are happening. I'm a father of three girls. I have a teenager, all of this type of thing. I work in the field. I hear these things every day and so forth. But ideally, if somebody's not in the right space, the head space, they don't feel safe, and that could be, that includes a lot of different things, right? It could be that, exactly what you've mentioned. It could be, some sort of abuse going on. And abuse can go on in a religious setting as well too, so I want to make this
Right,
very clear
right.
because sometimes I think one of the biggest problem, one of the biggest mistakes people make is that they're looking elsewhere, and not realizing that sometimes the problem is right in your own circle, right? So for example, when somebody run away, they are affected by people in their own circle, right? It's not going to be somebody come from the other end of the world and kind of make things complicated for them. And keep in mind, little things add up to be, a lot of to be bigger things. So that could be deep depression, where a little bit of abuse and verbal abuse. Those are all powerful pieces. Physical abuse, all of those are powerful pieces. Abuse. I mean, bullying, at school as well too. Bullying into any sort of organization as well too. These things does happen. It's just that people don't bring it out, and when it becomes too much for a youth to handle, they are looking to escape because they no longer feel safe in that space. And so, as much as I am a religious individual and a former assistant priest, I'll tell you
Right.
this much right now: sometimes praying is not enough. Right? I believe in miracles. I experience miracles. I will leave that for a different session. But sometimes the prayer is just not enough. We have to act. We have to make sure that we're not blaming, the individual that's involved, because when somebody run away, they're not in the right headspace. So we can say all kind of different things that, oh my goodness, like how come they're not recognizing or realizing, the damages that they're causing when it comes to family members, parents, friends, people in their circle, and so forth. When people run away, right, there's a good chance that they are in a safer space, right? Because they're looking for that safe space, right? And a safe space for that individual could be in the street, right?
Right.
Being, at and again, this is not pointing finger on anybody for that
Right.
matter,
Right.
right? Being at home doesn't necessarily mean it's safe, right? And so that's something we have to be mindful of. And I'm sure that eventually we'll talk a little bit about that. But study shows, again, I want to kind of repeat it here in different ways. Study shows very clearly that nobody run away from home when everything's perfect, right? When things go wrong, when people are not feeling as if their opinion matters, they don't feel loved, they don't feel valued, and so forth. They're looking for that, and that's usually what it is. It's simple as that.
Now
Not
I
easy
want
thing, by the way.
yes, but I want to deviate from that a little bit,
Yeah,
or to add a little bit of
yeah, yeah.
experience.
Sure, absolutely.
Sometimes, right, these young people think that they're running away from home and thinking that they're going into a in a different situation. But sorry about that. They my dog. Sorry about that. But the thing is that when they run away from home, sometimes they run into worse, because guess what? Sometimes they go with a friend. The friend introduce them to drugs, alcohol, and for some females could be for into prostitution, and some of these teens may even end up being sold to people for different things. What's your take?
Yes, I mean, well, it happens all the time, right? And that's one of the reason, as adults, as parents, as caretaker, we have teachers, religious leaders, we have an obligation to kind of keep an eye out on things. We all have our own, things going on, and we cannot keep an eye on everything. But these things, if we don't pay keen attention, those things happens. Because I mean, the old saying where Shakespeare says, show me a friend, I'll tell you who
Tell
you
who
are,
you are.
kind of thing, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's the thing. Having said that, though, Ken, I think it's also important for us to um, accept that sometimes people have to be in a situation before they kind of learn, and because different people learn differently. So, for example, I might say to a teenager or an individual for that matter that don't put your hand on that stove because you're going to get burned, and they might not take my word for it.
Right.
Some people, they have to get burned first before they realize and learn, oh my goodness, putting my hands on the stove when it's on is not a good thing. So some people have to experience it. So come back to what you've said. When a teenager ran away, let's say some people, let's exactly what you said, it happens all the time, I see it every day. Let's say they get involved in drugs, with friends or somebody else, and all of these types of things. That's when they get to compare the difference. Having said that, though, for some people, right? Um, and I'm trying my best to use the right wording here. At that moment, at that time, at that spacing, in terms of how they're thinking, even though we are not seeing it to be the best thing for them, they're seeing it to be the best thing for themselves. So no different if I was to bring a pig, right? Bring a pig, and I'm giving that pig that shower, clean the pig out and so forth. That pig is not going to be happy with me because I'm trying to get the pig nice and clean and so forth, right? That pig is much happier to be loose, roll in that mud, and that's what they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not the best example, but I wanted to be blunt so that people kind of get it. Because what I see to be best and safe for you, the reality is it might not be what you want in life, right? And sometimes people, you really have to face certain things before you kind of understand the difference, um, and then make choices from there. Not that it is easy for people who are involved, whether that be a caretaker, whether that be parents, whether that people in the community. Not easy, but at the end of the day, it's not what we want really, to be
Right,
open and
right.
yeah.
Um, my next thing is that, as parents, you are a parent, I'm a parent.
Mhm.
How can we identify early signs that the child is considering to run away from home?
Yes, so I was mentioning earlier that it's important for us to be conscious, and so when we are parents, when we are public figure, when we are in situation where we have young people around us, it is important for us to monitor or try to be conscious of their behavioral patterns. So let's say of a youth, or of your children, you will know them well, right? So let's
Right.
say you know that they will go to school, they'll come back, the people them that they're that they hang out with, all of that, that
Right.
they go to bed a certain time, wake up a certain time. But if you start to recognize a change in them in terms of behavior, they no longer want to go to school, right? If you find that they are losing their appetite, for example, they don't want to eat anymore, you will get to know their favorite places, their favorite food. If you realize that they're not seeing meaning in those things anymore, those are all signs, right? They don't want to, and this is very common, especially with teenagers. I see it all the time. They don't necessarily have the motivation to get out of bed anymore, right? And then we now are thinking to ourselves like, there's nothing wrong with you. You have everything you want, right? And we have to be very mindful of that for sure. And once we see that, we have to take this thing seriously. The problem is not all of us will have that knowledge, to kind of recognize and you see to be a problem where we can kind of try to offer help like right away, and kind of being non-judgmental, and being more of a listener and supporter rather than giving our input without even understanding what's going through with that individual, right? Because listening, I always say this, and this is one of the best advice I can give to folks. I'm hoping that people can walk away with this, if anything at all, that listening to somebody does not mean that you are agreeing with them, but at least you give them that space just to listen
Mm-hmm.
to what they're saying.
Absolutely. Bansi Prasad, a very good evening to you. Sati Georgia, a very good evening to you. Um, my next thing is, you know, you talk about parents, right? And children and so on, but it's tough sometimes for us as parents to understand these children, really, um, with all of these things. But you're right, we have to let people know, our boys and girls, our teenagers know that at least we are not, we don't have to agree with them, but let them know at least they are being heard in all that's going on. Um, what preventative measures can parents and they say, as you know, it takes a village to raise a child. So, what are some of the preventative measures that we could take to prevent these children from run away from home?
Yeah,
And
so I
is our
think,
community
yeah,
has a
absolutely,
responsibility?
for sure.
And let's talk, as you said, you were a pandit, a priest. Is your church have a responsibility for all of this?
I'm trying to set my camera while you're asking a question.
That's okay. Yes.
um, and so, it is a very good question, but keep in mind that it is very complex as well too, right? Because at the end of the
Right.
day, as a leadership body, as a whether that be pandit or a caregiver, supporter, and some our community leader and so forth, we ourselves have an obligation to take care of ourselves, right? And
Right.
sometimes we ourselves are we are not in the right space in terms of even taking care of ourselves. So if we cannot do that for ourselves, it makes it extremely difficult, right, when it comes to supporting a young individual, right? But ideally, And some people have those support though. There's no question about that. So, but I
Right.
really, some people have really good parents. And when I talk about good parents, I'm not talking about getting all the gadgets and driving buy them their a brand new car for their birthday. And I'm not talking about those types of things. I'm talking
Right.
about supportive parents. To be there when in a continuous basis, right? Ideally, if people have those kinds of wraparound service in terms of good support, from caregiver, good support, and when it comes to the school system, which is very difficult to do because
Right. Right.
school system, I mean, it's always a struggle for you to have that because when it comes to social worker, for example, the school system, they will only have, I don't know, a couple handful of, let's say, social worker, for example, right? So they would, so that is not enough to really offer, extra support to all of the student. I'm just giving an example there. When it comes to, let's say, religious leader and so forth, it is an opportunity for them to kind of, maybe to be that role model as well too. So if people have all of that kind of support, obviously an individual will strive, they will grow, and they will grow up to be champion in society. Keep in mind, you and I, we only see the shiny part of things, right?
Right.
We will see all the fancy things and so forth. But there are a lot of things usually go behind the scenes that you and I don't get to see. And sometimes it happens even in religious organization, religious setting, right? And that's not an exception per se. But ideally, when people have that support, and support looks differently for different people. So let's say I'm and let's say an individual, a young child wants to, let's say, participate in karate, for example, right? Let's say that's their passion, that's something they want to do. But let's say as a parent or as I don't know, community leader, let's say we are saying no, that's not, you should, refrain from doing that, that you should be doing this and so forth. That's not support. All right, that's really holding somebody hostage to do something that they don't want, right? So it all
Hmm.
depends. When we talk about support, it's not about, you have food on the table. It's not only that, right? It's about really meeting the individual where they're at. And I don't want to sound like I'm in a in a clinical session where you're doing therapy work here. But at the end of the day, we have to meet people where they're at. And I've seen situation, and I don't want to get into depth in it, but I think it's worthwhile for me to mention it. As I
Yes.
understand it, and I'm only sharing it because it's public information. As I understand it, there's a missing child in New York there, and I've seen like spiritual leaders like blaming the child kind of thing, and that is a problem. And I say this for a reason because um, that's not how you fix these kinds of fall, right? That's not encouraging for the child to come back home. I'm not going to focus on that, but I think it's important for me to at least connect the dots here because
Right.
it is
Right.
an issue to me. Yeah, I don't want to make it the
Right.
main focus, but because it was public information, and I don't comment on these kinds of things. But it really bothered me when I saw that a religious leader was blaming the child and said that you're causing so much pain, that you need to come home. That is one of the biggest problem I see because they're not recognizing that that individual probably have so much pain that he cannot see the pain of other people, right? And that's a problem.
Right. That's a true story. A
Yeah.
statement you made there. Um, yeah, and it's right. You said it right. You have to meet people where they're at, and don't judge them based on your yardstick or your ruler.
Mhm.
And so that's good to know. How can parents um, and caregiver create a safe space? Let's say that this child have moved away, gone, run away from home. How do we as parents create a safe space that this child could come back um, and feel heard and feel supported at the same time?
Absolutely. So are you referring specifically to this situation that I've kind of
We
felt,
could,
or in
if you
general?
want, we can
Yeah,
go
yeah,
there
yeah,
as
yeah,
you know.
yeah, for sure. And so keep in mind, we are only here to kind of support, and we, right. And so my response is, we really have to make sure that we are not judging that individual, that child. And I hope
Right,
that people, regardless of what choice he made and whatnot, the child needs to feel supported, right? It's
right,
not like that we have to put into practice.
Mm-hmm.
right? So we cannot just say, okay, and this goes for any missing person, so to speak. If we cannot say, oh, we love you, we'll support you and so forth. It doesn't work like that. Those things it has to be seen through the eyes of that individual, so they know that they can come to you and they can be themselves without being judged, right? And we now have the tendency, and there could be a cultural thing as well too, and in terms of you know it's the way people are brought up as well too, right? And so we have to make sure that we are not putting our values on any individual for that matter. So um, and when it comes to public space and so forth, we have to create it in a way, right? And that's, I've actually said this before in the past, because I went to a mandir one time, and people were saying, well, how come they don't have people come to the mandir? It's empty, and people want to come, so they are blaming people of not coming to the temple. But I see differently. I see that there's a problem here. Is that we now need to do something to make it safe so that people can come here, right? And so forth. So I think we really have to not only say things, right? We have to kind of do it, and really make it happen. But it has to be, the individual has to be ready, right? That individual has to be convinced that they now can be vulnerable and not being judged in any shape or form. Because being a teenager, one thing I can tell you, and we all were teenager, obviously, it
Right.
is one of the most challenging time, right? Because there's so much happening, and we live in a different era right now as well too. It is very difficult out there. That I can tell you, peer pressure, all of these types of things, right? So criticism is that's, and I don't want to take away any spotlight here, but that's how the Dr. Narine show was born, by the way, to create a safe space for positive energy only. But yeah, but that's going to be my take on that.
Narine, this part here that I'm going to move away from part of the discussion,
Hmm.
but since that you um, talk a little bit about it, and today, while I was at work, I was thinking about it that we can talk a little bit about culture, and
Hmm.
we don't have to go in
Yeah,
depth of things. You
absolutely.
know, you and I were born in Guyana. I came here about 30 something years ago. In Ghana, they were much more controlled with children. When your father watch you or your mother watch you, you have to, you don't get the message. You need to move or they would beat you. I was 13, 14 years.
Hmm.
I still get licks. You know
Hmm.
what I'm saying? And there is a culture, there's a shift in culture because guess what? Our parents who Guyanese grew up in Guyana came to America now with our children here, and our children is now going to school and is mixing with people from different cultures and different teens with different culture and different things and ways how they do things. So it is a little, I want to feel it's a little challenging out there for our young people, even to our parents, because back in the days when your parents tell you something, you couldn't answer back, you
Hmm.
couldn't respond to them, but now the children turn and answer you back and tell you things. And you have to just look at it and it's like have a constructive criticism or talk in a constructive way. What's your take? You in Canada, I'm in the States.
Yeah.
We in terms of culture.
Yeah, so obviously the culture within question, it plays a role in terms of how we parent, right? And there's a reason why we do offer all of these, training on an ongoing basis for parents in particular, and so forth, right? Because the generation now, as you know, is very, very different. But
Right.
we also have to realize that what I mentioned earlier, being a teenager itself is extremely difficult, right? And
Right.
so there's one thing I learned over the years, and I try my best to put it into practice. And not easy to do. So they study shows that a teenager is like fire, right? And the parent is like the ice. So we have to try to be that ice. So when you're with a teenager now, there will be all kind of different things coming at you, but that's teenager being a teenager, so to speak, not making excuses for anybody. But if we parent in the form of the ice, now we will cool that down. That fire, we can cool it down. But if we are in front of a teenager, let's say we're in front of fire now, and if we remove that ice and we also want to be a fire, think of what's going to happen here, right? And so we have to think along that line. um, And keep in mind, a lot of people became like parent, and I mean, as you would know, there's no manual, as to how
Right.
to how to kind of be a parent. You
Right.
learn,
Right.
you just figure things out. I know people will give you advice. Some This is not always the best advice. People give you advice based on their experience, things of that sort.
Absolutely.
Like I have three kids, and I can see that it's all different in terms of behavior, in terms of sleeping in the night or not sleeping in the night, and all of these like different personality and so forth. But it's all a learning thing, right? Um, but I think we have to come back and realize that at the end of the day, young people need to be respected as well too. And I think the more we educate ourselves, the more we understand. Because, like I said, teenagers will speak a certain way, and we know because we were brought up differently, and we see it to be an issue. And so forth. But it's sometimes their natural way of just having a communication, and having that knowledge makes a huge difference for sure. Something to speak with a higher tone, and this is not a one teenage thing. Like this is across the spectrum. Like that's study shows this, right. This is part of them, growing up and all these things.
And it has to be difficult for the child too, or those who are in the situation, because when they home, they have to be proper. They're expected to be talk properly, but when they go to school, they have to change to talk like yo and all these kind of things. So it has to be different. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
that's
They
how
have to
they
fit
talk to
in.
their friends, right?
Yeah, they have to fit in. I mean, they and I know I'm saying it a few times, but I think it's worth it. It's not, first of all, it's not easy being a parent. Like right, it's not easy being a parent. um because sometimes we have expectations, we kind of share things, or we try to model things based on how we were brought up, all of these types of things. And it might not necessarily be what what the teenager wants. Like me, for example, and I always say this to my teenager. Like she's in high school right now, and I'm very, and I've always been this way. I'm really good academically, and
Right.
so, but that's me, and that's something I kind of embrace, and I enjoy my journey. But I always say to her that you do not have to be like me. Just stay
Oh,
focused, doing one thing, whatever that is, and I support her along that way, and so forth. I think that's important. So yes, we might be role models and so forth, but we have to be mindful of that as well too. That's for sure.
that's right. Because and you talk about expectations, and expectations, as we know, can lead to disappointments. And like for example, like I would expect, and I think it's a normal thing sometimes, because as parents we want to see our children take their education, despite we know not everyone is born to become a doctor
Mhm.
or social worker. Some people born to their job is going to do to clean the floor. And in my opinion is, as long as whatever you do it well, and you're enjoying what you do, that's all that matters really, what I mean. And I see Shanta Bridge Mohan is watching. We will come to your question in just a couple of minutes. How should a parent respond to their child who is threatening to run away? What the conversations should be like? If your child come to you and say, listen, I'm going to run away from here. I can't deal with this. How should the parent deal with that?
So it is a good question, and there are different ways. So we have to be mindful when we talk about runaway as well too, because sometimes people just move out and they start a life on their own, and they've done well as well
Right.
too. But I think digging a little bit more, kind of understand what they mean by that, because I don't think, people might use different terms as well too. They might say that, when I finished college, or when I finished, high school, or whatever the case may be, I want to kind of move out. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It could be that they just want to kind of, explore and understand and learn some new skills, being an independent individual. I see it all the time here as well. This is not necessarily run away. And so it's hard though for parents to kind of, to hear that, because ideally we want, depending on the relationship with the kids, we want them to be close to us, and that can be hard. But if, let's say, but ideally though, nobody will say, study shows that nobody actually say I'm going to run away. Like They do it when they feel is the right time, kind of thing. But if that conversation was to come up, I think parents have to, or caregiver, they have to kind of take it seriously. They have to kind of maybe look into the mirror as well to, what is it that I'm not doing right? Because in
Good.
their mind, they might think
That's a
that they're
good
doing,
point.
yeah, they might think that I'm doing everything right. I'm kind of, bringing in the money. I make a lot of money. I take them for shopping. I give them the Christmas present, the birthday present, and so forth. And sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's about they want that presence, right? Present in terms of the physical present to be with the father, be with the mother, be with the brother. They want those kinds of connection and not necessarily all the other material things as well too. And that's one reason do a little check-in, of ourselves, because we have the tendency to check in on everybody else to see how other people are doing their life,
Right, right.
living their lives, and we forget about ourselves that hey, we have flaws as well too, right? But when that conversation comes up, we have to kind of take it seriously and be realistic as well too. Because I will say to my daughter as well too, and let her know real life out there. And as you know, it's not easy out there. Things have it's
I
not
know.
different. It's not what it used to be 20 years ago, right? And so this is serious conversation. If you want to go out on their own, they will need jobs. All these types of things. It's not you just go out with friends and you're kind of and thinking that friends going to look after you. So I think that open conversation, being honest and kind of open, can go a far way. And so if we are kind of not knowing what's happening, that can be dangerous as well too. But definitely should be kind of taken seriously. And never blame the child though, because when you start to blame the child, the individual, that becomes a problem. Because usually a teenager will want to have the last word, and it can be difficult for us as adults, as parents, to swallow. We want to have it
Yes.
because we're thinking, I'm the boss here. I'm the one, working. I'm the one paying the bills. That when you start to pay the bills, then that you can speak and so forth. Those are all dangerous, powerful, damaging pieces. That I can tell you for sure.
You know, um, what about if a child, and I'm just playing this scenario, let's say that the child is having a problem, let's say with the father, is it the best thing for someone else to intervene, like the mother or an uncle or an aunt or the religious leader, to just chime in and let the person who the child is having problem with stay aside for now?
So ideally, the best approach is for that individual to have that conversation with the person he or she's having that conflict with, right?
Yes.
Because I mean, and that goes for any sort of relationship. It could be a child and parent relationship. It could be even relationship in workplace, and so forth. It is so important to have that conversation first, because a teenager will see things differently. The father will see things differently. A father parent might say kind of what we said earlier, that look, I'm not doing anything wrong. Like I'm the one providing. You are the one that are not listening, all of this type of thing. And then the teenager might say, like, "What do you mean? I'm not listening, right?" And so forth. So it's the way of communicating, right? They're not necessarily on the same page when they start to kind of communicate that way. If nothing comes out of that, depending on the relationship, when it comes to the other spouse, whether that be the mother, for example, in this scenario you're saying here, depending how well we raise our children. So if that child is open enough to come and say, look, mom, that dad, this is a situation here, then mom cannot take side. Like mom have to kind of listen and so forth,
Right, right,
as
right.
well too, and listen to that child kind of, and not necessarily always play it safe, but the child, and most of the time, honestly, be in doing this kind of thing, most of the time, people want to be heard. People want to feel supported. They don't want to feel as if like they're walking on
Eggshell.
eggshell. They don't want to feel as if okay, I'm going to come home now, I'm going to have this huge problem with dad and mom. And honestly, these things happen. I meet lots of teenagers, and this is the kind of things they are sharing. They're sharing, that mom and dad, they argue all the time. And even that's the interesting. So even though you're
Right.
not arguing and fighting with the kids, teenagers are just smart people.
Yes.
They're right. And so if the parents will be fighting constantly, it's not healthy for the kids as
Hmm.
well too. Not that people don't have disagreement and argument. Those are normal things. Every household has those things, but we have to
Absolutely.
kind of be mindful as well too. And And one of the techniques when it comes to psychoeducation and so forth is that there's that rule where we really encourage people to pause for 10 seconds, before you say anything.
Yes.
And study shows it works because sometimes we are so, we're so up there where we want to get, we want to say certain things, we want to get it out, we want to get the last word. And then at the end of it all, what end up happening? We end up have a lot of regrets. Then we feel ashamed of ourselves, and then we say, "Oh, we're not going to do that back." And then we start to apologize, and the whole thing continue on and on to a point where a teenager doesn't feel not necessarily belong, but they don't feel like good to be in a space as such. You just want to be out of that space, right? It's a very toxic environment, and nobody. I mean, like things usually look shiny from the outside, right?
Right, right.
Because I know of somebody who divorced very recently, and they lived for about 20 something years, and somebody make one or two comment, "Oh, you left your husband." These are normal things like people will say. And the lady mentioned, responded and say, "You know what? You don't live in my house, so you don't know where it's leaking."
Absolutely.
And I think that was a powerful response, right? That doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I'm not trying to say that people should come out there and just share their private story. But what I'm
Right.
saying is that these things, it does happen, not uncommon. We all have had our bad days, all of these type of thing, right? So it happened in every household. It's just that some household it is more toxic than some, and not every child is able to handle those kinds of pressure.
Tara Singh, a very good evening to you. Sapna Deodat is saying good night to Narendradat Sukram. Also, we have Jean Chan. Good evening to you. Um, Siram, my friend, just came back from Ghana. Siram Killer, good evening, sir, and thank you very much. Miss Bansi Prasad, a very good evening to you. Um, probably we can go right here. I'm going to take this now. As a, as the parent of this boy, and you can
Mm,
play with it how you want to, so that we don't get ourselves into
mhm.
trouble. um, as the parent for this young boy, and we could be very specific. What, as you are, we know you're a therapist, you're a doctor. Um, what would you advise this parent to do at this stage of the game?
Yeah, for sure. So a couple things here. So first of all, as a parent, and we are speaking only because this is public information, so we're speaking
Right,
based on what we've seen.
right,
I can almost put myself in their shoe, how difficult it is
right,
to be in a situation as such, because when my kids go out there, my wife and I will always have a conversation. The very first thing I say, like, who are they with? Like, that's my very first
right,
thing,
right,
right?
right,
We have like long weekend coming up, obviously, because of the Good Friday and the Easter and so forth. And so there are like plans happening. So earlier today, I asked my wife, like who are they going with, and
right,
and so those kinds of things. So I kind of, as a parent, like I mean, I will never know what they feel like, but I can almost put myself in their shoe, because if I make arrangement for my kid to go, with their friends, for example, and I'm saying, look, by 7 o'clock I want you home back, and if 7 o'clock passed by, like I started to have anxiety, and right, because we are parent and so forth, so I monitor in a situation as such. I mean, they know how they live their life, and no judgment here, but I would make sure that I will encourage both parents and so forth to kind of continuously be supportive, as they have been, based on what they're showing out there. And I think that
right,
they need to be commended for that, right? Because it's not an easy thing. But we also want to be respectful of the individual as well too. Very, very painful. Um, but we want to make sure that the child does not get any sort of blame. Now is not a time for the blaming game. That I can tell
right.
you.
On
And
both
so
sides.
100%, yes. So definitely, so no, that's right. So we, as I see people put all kinds of different comments and so forth, but we have to be mindful and respectful of their family, and right. So this is not time to blame anybody, and this is not a time to even blame the child. Most importantly,
Right,
right, because the child is probably watching, seeing all of these types of things, right? That he's
right,
probably watching right now too.
right,
And so, if we will say, well, you're causing a lot of pain to your parents, you don't know how happy you are and so forth, that is totally nonsense, because none of us will know those things, right? But if the child is watching right now while we are at it, if he's watching right now, I will encourage him to kind of reach out to somebody close to, whether that be, your parents, your brother, and whatnot, and kind of let him know that, yeah, you are okay. I think
Right.
that will be a good thing, and it's going to
To
show
start.
strength. It's going to show strength in your end. Um, and that's important. So that's the only thing I kind of encourage that young man, and there's no question about that. But in terms of the parents, they cannot give up hope in that sense. I'm not sure of the law in New York City. Here, if here in Canada, if you're 16 years older, you can make that decision to kind of leave home. So it wouldn't consider run away. You're making that decision. It's just like when somebody finished college, they've decided to, or if they're going to college, they decide to move out of the house with communication and so forth. And so it gets a little bit complicated here because some people are using the term, okay, missing and all these types of things, missing, right? And so that's a little bit vague in different way because I'm not sure if police is involved. Like I don't know any of those types of
Right,
things.
right. We don't know. We don't know
Very, yeah,
anything.
yes, for sure. But I mean, as parents, I think that the good assumption is that regardless of how they live their life, there has to be some sort of strong love within for their child. And
Of course.
I think it was demonstrated well based on videos I have seen. Not that no, there's no such thing as perfect parents and things of that sort, as we talked about earlier. It's a bit challenging based on the culture we came from and how we may handle certain situations and so forth. But the main thing here is that even the parents, like, you do not want to blame the child for anything. Wouldn't work. And even when the child comes back, and I'm be saying when the child comes back because I'm trying to be positive here.
Of course.
Um, you do not want to get back to any old type of thing and
Story.
raise old thing and say, well, it was you who caused that. You were the one who did that. You were the one who chose to do all of that. Like nothing is going to come out of it that way. It's going to be a regular pattern because if the child is feeling safe right now, because the child is probably feeling very safe now, that we don't know, but there's a good chance that that individual is feeling very safe right now, wherever he is. I don't know. I'm just saying. And let's say those things are happening. Not that it's happening. I'm just kind of giving an example, but we have to come back and be realistic here. Um, Nobody leave a home just like that, unless if something else went wrong and so forth. But it has to be, like I said, that person's probably is at a very low point in life, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, and nobody's recognizing it, right? And it's so much pressure there now that you're just trying to kind of escape, which is extremely difficult for sure. But the parents have to, it will be nice for the parents to be supported by the community in a way where people are not saying what they should, I mean, people are not blaming the parents on all these types. I'm not blaming anybody for that matter, right?
Right,
Because,
right.
because they're young parents as well too in that sense, and so forth. But my heart goes out to them and all the other situation. I was reading an article. One of my coworker went to New York City earlier this week to do a presentation when it comes to all of these related stuff. And when I was reading the article, um, there was some of the youths, they felt as if they were to report certain things. That's according to the article written in New York City. They feel as if like they will be blamed for all of these types of things, and that was hard to read because have they come forward and share what they were feeling and what was happening. They would have been definitely, they would have been supported, right? But
Yeah.
when you're a teenager, you don't have certain knowledge, you're afraid for when it comes to certain things and all of that, right? So the parents will have to make sure that the child continuously feels safe to continue, to do conversation. And let's say the child comes back and the child chooses not to speak or share anything. We have to meet that individual where they're at, that child, and wait until they are ready to start to share. And I will encourage having a professional person involved if the child is willing to do so. We cannot push him into any sort of therapy comes from it itself, because sometimes it's not always therapy that's needed. Even though like I have youths coming, it was encouraged by them, encouraged by people to come to see a therapist and so forth. Sometimes I'm realizing that that's not what they actually need. They just need to be involved in sports. They just need something else, not necessarily therapy. Because as you would know, therapy is a very structured type of thing, right? It's not for
Right, right.
everybody, for sure.
And I want to make a plea to that with this young man. And I totally agree with you that, you know what, he probably be at a safe space right now. But Kumar, if you are hearing this, you can reach out to me or reach out to somebody in the community. Let them know that you are safe and that you could just reach out to somebody, let them know you're safe, and that let them give you a minute to breathe. And when you're ready to come back, you can do it. Because the truth of the matter is, this whole family dynamic here, everybody is in pain. The boy, his grandmother, his parents, and so on, everyone is experiencing some form of pain. So, and I'm not saying that you should come home now, but let somebody know that you are safe, or
Mhm.
get the message to your mom or your dad. Um, how do we help a child, as you said, reintegrate back into his home with his parents, and his community, especially like with this young man? He is from a Mandera. So how do he reintegrate back to go back without being embarrassed or feel shame and all these things?
Yeah, yeah. Well, good question. And so that child, and that is where I would think that professional help will come in handy,
Yes.
because it's not it's sometimes when we have these kind of situation, because so many different people are involved. I would recommend all the church people, if they're watching, by the way,
Right, right, right,
go and look for professional help, because if they really care for this individual, they will want to learn skills how to approach a situation as such.
right.
Because based on what I've seen, where a pundit made a comment and say that he's putting people through pain, I think that if that child go back to the mandir, that's not a safe space. And
Mm,
I'm sorry that I'm saying this, but I'm saying
mm.
this from a professional lens, right? If you are a religious individual and you are saying to the child now that you are causing pain to a lot of people here, right? That's not a good
Wow.
sign of a religious leader to guide his child so that he can integrate back into society. So sometimes, I mean, from a professional lens here, and a person who grew up going to the temple, and I was a assistant pundit at age 14 years old too. I can relate. I understand these things. So maybe going to the temple might not be a safe space. So what I'm trying to say here is that the people who want to support this young man, they themselves will have to seek professional help, because I'm not seeing professional response, um, for, like based on what I'm seeing, and people they've made like even videos publicly. When I'm seeing all these kinds of things, all they're doing, they're blaming this child. So
Right.
this child, he's seeing all of this. So what they're doing here now, they are creating more of a barrier, preventing that child from coming home or
Oh,
coming
wow.
back to them, right? Because that's what they're saying. You're saying, "Oh my goodness," that what they're telling the child is that he's the problem, right? And so why would the child want to come back if all of this is being thrown at them? So I think the parents, I mean, they're in a different headspace right now too. But I think
Yes.
people have to be respectful of the parents and be mindful, and support them, and putting those kind of comment openly, and coming from like religious leaders and so forth. It's not helping the parents in any shape or form. And I think, and I hope people don't misunderstand what I'm trying to say here. That's not how you help a situation. The child won't come back when they're seeing all of these kinds of things that way. The child wants to make sure that he feels safe and supported. And it goes to show that if that's what people are doing in his circle, let's say in the temple setting, I'm just saying, not blaming any temple people. I'm just going based on what I've seen and all of this type of thing. Maybe these kinds of things keep going on. Maybe it's nothing that even maybe nothing has to do with even in his home, for example, right? It could be his own circle, all of these types of things, right? So I just bring that out there. I just want to be real as well too, not because we hear of tempo, not because somebody put on a dhoti and all of this type of thing, meaning that they are God. Right, that's a I could put on a dhoti, and which I do from time to time, and and so forth. But we have to be these are all real things, because sometimes we are blaming other people, and we are blaming people we talk about, oh, maybe drugs and so forth, right? Because we think that way, but it could be right at a temple there are issues too. I'm not saying that. I'm thinking it's very much
Right,
possible.
right.
So I hope that you're not misunderstand me too, Ken. But
But
very, very possible. These things
but
does happen.
to be very honest with you, I was talking to Shanta Bridge-Mohan, who's in the chat box, and I last night while I was in bed, dissect that same comment that you were talking about, and I was telling her the same thing. I believe, and this does not goes to one religious leader.
Hmm.
This goes to all the religious leaders. That you know what, if you're going to be the leader for any mandir or church or whatever it is, that you have to show more empathy towards these kind of cases, and you have to be like somewhere in a safe space where your members of your church or your temple, wherever, that they could come and speak to you. It shows to me that in this kind of setting that there is no safe space really, and I would only hope that this is a good time to examine the whole scenario and the whole the members of that mandir to see why a young man who is we say is a pandit cannot come to someone, and we all know that the best thing to do is to start with your spiritual leader to get some help or whatever it is. The beautiful Miss Ariana is on, and I'm glad that she tuned in. She's saying that, it's not helping the situation. Let me ask you a question, though, out of curiosity. Now, when I look at Facebook, I see there is and I want to say it's with good intentions. Do you think that we should ease off on the Facebook posting? Because obviously, I want to believe that this probably young man, if he have access, that he's reading all these posts. Is it good for him, or should we just back off and let time tell?
Good question. And so the Facebook post will be good if it's all positive pieces, right?
Right.
And so he can see love and he can kind of just feel, he can just feel it. But based on what I have seen, and this is, I'm talking about what I've seen personally, a leader, a very popular pundit in New York City, very much known, was blaming that child. And I don't put any kind of comment on people's posts. I don't do that. But I felt obligated to do that, do it this time. And the only thing I said, like, blaming the child is not doing any good. That was my only comment there. And that individual ended up removing the entire post.
Right,
Where,
right, right.
not my response per se, but the whole thing. If the child see those kinds of things, it is extremely dangerous, and that is a problem, right? And so for me, I see a bigger problem here. Yes, the child, it's the, like, like, people are not too clear, or at least I'm not clear, right? The child still seems to be missing as we speak, as I understand it. But I see a bigger problem here too. Like, I mean, how supportive are these institutions, right? These religious institutions, like how supportive it is, right? And I don't want to guess here, but I'm just saying, I'm based on what I've seen, and all of this type of thing. And so there's a good chance that maybe the child reached out as well too, and maybe nothing came out of it because he's young, he's only 17. There's a good chance that they themselves don't have that skill set, and it's show under that post shows clearly that even though they're a religious leader, they don't have the skill set to recognize that their own people is going through a tough time, which is a problem, right?
Yeah,
It's not about
definitely.
singing a song, and it's not about number of views and all these type of things. I think people are missing all of the important pieces, right? I'm just giving kind of, while you're asking me, I'm kind of responding
Right,
accordingly
right.
too,
That's
because
fine.
right, and so forth. And so I think if people want to post, I didn't post anything. I think it has to be positive and no guessing game, and kind of being mindful as to what they post and what they share, right? For sure. But I can assure you that child sees everything that's what goes on, like what's happening there. He's probably watching right now in different ways, right? He's probably beside a friend and who knows what. I'm just saying, or will be watching at some point, all of these types of things. And if he is, like, as Ken and I were talking earlier, it is very clear that you are very loved by many, many people. It's just
He
that not
was,
every
yeah.
definitely. It's just that not everybody knows how to show it to you, and so I will strongly encourage you to reach out to the people who are close to, you, regardless of what situation you may have had, and let them know that you kind of let them know that you're kind of here, and then you're figure things out until you make next step. I think that will be key. That's gonna be my advice to him if he's watching right now.
Thank you very much. Also, it is such an honor to have the beautiful Miss Bibi Ahmad watching from Guyana. Bibi also is a domestic violence advocate. She's advocating for a lot of things in Ghana. Baby, I'm glad to see that you on, and I would really love to do some shows with you, baby. But I know baby's a very busy girl. But let's let's do some shows together. Let's help our teenagers for a better tomorrow. And I gotta tell you that I'm so glad that Dr. Narine, that who I'm talking to right now, always makes the time to talk to me for us to do shows together so that we could help our community or those of us who are in the diaspora. So just to let you know, Narine, that I really appreciate you coming on. Um, and so I would want to plan a couple more shows with your help, probably Monday nights or whenever it is. So, but we will talk about that later on. Um, what kind of counseling or therapy is most effective for children or teenagers who run away from home?
Yeah. So ideally, a child. I mean, for me personally, based on study, a child can benefit from therapy, right? Having
Right.
said that, though, sometimes therapy is not necessarily what they need, depending on what the situation is. So, if I was to have that child in front of me, I will be doing like a complete assessment, right?
Right. Right.
And that's how we kind of start a treatment plan and stuff of that sort. Um, we are not sure. It could be that there's some trauma situation happening there that led to different things, allowing him to kind of function, daily functioning. And so it could be that we have to look deep there and fix that piece of tighten that there, and then everything else is kind of okay. But based on what's happening right now, it is clear based on the situation. Somebody run away from home, their professional help will is a way to go. But that doesn't necessarily mean if the child returns home today after the show, that okay, let's start therapy tomorrow. But it could be one of the plan the parents can have in place. Having said that, though, if the child go that route, I would encourage the parent to be part of the process, because if they send the child for therapy, then they're telling the child in a different way that he is the problem, and that is a problem, right? And so it has to be done together. The all religious leader and all of that putting comment, about the child should join this child and say, look, we are here in this thing together. But sending the child to therapy, that's the biggest problem, because the child would say like, I'm the problem here, and that can be dangerous. So they have to do together. Is what I'm trying to say.
And how do you help a child who doesn't trust? Right now, it doesn't seem to me that he doesn't trust anyone or he's holding off. How do you help a child who doesn't trust adults or has experienced trauma? And it's like, because like we know that, and you and I know that, we don't know what is going on in the house. Why this guy run away? There has to be something, like I said. So, how can we help?
Yeah. So this, first of all, they have like he has to be ready as well too.
Right, right.
I want to make sure I had a little bit of a glitch in my ear there, so I'm not sure if I heard like the last piece of what you were asking. So maybe it'd be better off if you just repeat the last piece of what you said, just to make sure I get you
I
right.
will go for all over again. How do you help a
Yeah.
child who doesn't trust an adult,
Yeah.
or if he had experienced any kind of trauma
Yeah.
down the line? And let's talk a little bit. Do you think that this boy may be depressed a little bit with all that's going on?
So, like at this point, to the fact that the child like run away, there's a good chance that whatever issue, whatever was happening, it leads to a little bit of a depression there. So he's not like in the right headspace, so to speak. In terms of the trust, so one of the things we usually do when we have young people, we also try to match them with a young therapist as well too. So, for
Yes.
example, he's 17, so I would match him with a, like a 65, 70-year-old therapist to try to help him, right? Because it wouldn't go so well based on
Right.
studies. So we try to have like younger therapists to
Therapist.
kind of being part of that so they can speak the same language, so to
Correct.
speak, and the approach. But generally speaking, when somebody's trained in that field, they have techniques and that could make a huge difference. And and they I kind of still meet them where they're at, not try to kind of blame the child, kind of thing, right? But there's like a slow process, kind of thing, right? And once that child is at a comfort level, which people train for all of this, then you'll be amazed to know everything else that that comes out, right? But the child has to feel and know that even in that session, it is safe, so they can be vulnerable there, right? Which, like I said, it's a technique, and it could take a few seconds as well too for the child to just get everything out. It does happen as well too if you reuse the right term. So, for example, therapy is very structured, but like when you're speaking to a child, like I think you used like a good term before. You have to speak in that speak their language, like how teenagers will speak and so forth. You wouldn't necessarily speak those therapeutic terms, if you know what I mean, right? Yeah.
And I think that was my last question, but I want to say to, I believe that the family too also will benefit with some kind of therapy with this kind of trauma that they have experienced in all of this. What's your take as a professional?
100%. So right now, I would suggest that the parents, having those kinds of knowledge and background, I will encourage the parents to start therapy now today. Extremely important. They're in pain, right? And so they need to, because they won't be able to feed off an empty bucket, regardless of how much love they have for their child.
Absolutely.
They will have to make sure that they take care of themselves, so that way they can continuously stay, stay strong. And anybody else who is in that circle, if they're affected by that, I think it's important for them to see a professional person for sure. So that way, when the return happens, they can respond accordingly, all of these types of things. Because like I said, like when that time comes, then if we start the blaming game and so forth, that child is going to be gone for sure again. And then he's gonna have more experience how to make it work for him, right? Because he has done it very successfully. um, and so the approach will be very different. So it's going to be a good opportunity now for them to start a therapy now. You don't wait; you kind of do it now. Um, Professional will be beneficial. If it's still a stigma for them and they don't believe in it, there's nothing you and I can do for sure. Something like we have to be vulnerable, and nobody knows it all. I don't know it all. I have broken days, and I've been at very low point in my life, but for some reason, I always hang on really, really tight. um, so I carry on my life even with pain, inside and so forth. I'm in a really good place in life right now. I'm grateful for that. But what I'm saying, like throughout my life, I've been in low spots and so forth as well too. But professional help is one of the best things you can do. That I can tell you, based on feedback I've gotten from people, based on these studies. These are all science. These are things to study here. These are right. But we live in North America here, so it should be a little bit easier. I know the stigma is kind of outside of North America, because this is a North America thing. This whole therapy thing is started here in North America, right? Just so
Right. I want to read what Ariana says. As a mother who is raising a teen, we as parents have to ensure that we create a safe space at home for our children, and I had to learn this in time. They are already facing peer pressure at this age, so dealing with teenagers, we really have to try to look at it in a different perspective. Absolutely. We as parents, we especially grew up in Guyana and have children now. I was surprised to know that these children go through so much things at school, in high school. And school should really be a safe space for children. But these children are really misbehaving.
oh, for sure.
Um, and the other day they break my neighbor car, they break my car, they break my glass, my window. So it is tough, and I know it's tough for these parents, for all us as parents. Anyway, I want to say thank you so much, Narine. Is there anything that you really want to add that could benefit this young man and the family and the community here?
Yeah. So the other thing I'd like to say. So first of all, I think we have to commend you for making yourself available to talk about this topic, because it's extremely important. I would encourage people to kind of step back a little bit when it comes to this situation. Try not to be judgmental, to any family member. None of us are perfect. Um, And so anything we put out there in terms of opinion and so forth, let it be positive, encouraging, and so forth. Because if we do anything different, it's not really healthy for the family, but it's not healthy for anything in general. As we know, the social media thing is already messed up in its own way. And
Right, right.
so, but let thing heal, let thing take its own course. That child, as much as it is painful, that child is, again, we have to meet that child where he's at, and that child is probably feeling so safe, and and we're saying it's not safe. So we have to be
Right.
mindful of our language as well too. If I say anything that felt offended to anybody in any shape or form, I would like to apologize to now, so I don't have to receive any sort of email, because that's not my intention of things. But I have to be realistic as well too, right?
Correct.
I have, by the believe it or not, in 6 minutes, I have a therapy session where I'm seeing a client, um, and so we'll be talking about what they're going through. And so I'll be doing that believe it or not, before I wrap up my evening.
Yes, yes.
So
Wow.
thank you, Ken. We'll connect, but I think it's important for us to kind of continue to build on this and kind of follow and see what's happening. And thank you so much to the audience for watching, listen. But do share the page. Hopefully, people will get something out of it.
Thank you again, Narine. Thank you so much. If we had more time, I would have read
Mm.
Ariana comment. Ariana, tell you the other thanks and to continue what they show. To all of you, our guests, our viewers, please share the show. Tell a friend, share it to your friend, your family, and let's give this family, extend love to this family. And around that again, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the Ken Rampersaud show. There's a lot of restructuring going on. I don't know when I'm going to be back on, but I know it's Easter weekend coming on. And happy Easter to everyone. God bless all of you. And again, Dr. Narine, that thank you very much. Have a very pleasant evening,
Thank you.
everyone. Peace out.